The Sixers, we were having a little bit of fun, but usually there's a germ of truth in every single joke. I'm not saying they are a joke, but we were just joshing around that this is the end of the process. The process is officially needing to be 2.0, 3.0, or just blown up with what's going on with the Sixers. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, look, every conversation about Philadelphia has to be taken with the caveat that Ben Simmons isn't playing. And Simmons is one of the best point guards in the league, an all-star, an elite defensive player. So when you lose a player of that caliber, you lose a lot. And, they're replacing him in the lineup with Matisse Thybulle, who's a rookie. Shake Milton was in the G League last year. He's their starting point guard. So, I mean, there's a roster element to all this that has to be taken into account. But what is inexplainable, and I was at the game against Boston last night, the effort that was displayed was just inexcusable. I mean, they got up early, but when Joel Embiid went out and Boston picked up the tempo, they just folded. I mean, they just showed no energy in the second half of that game, no effort in the second half of that game. It's easy to beat up on Brett Brown, and ultimately, if they wind up getting swept or beaten 5 games, he's probably going to pay the price. But if you're a professional player, you've got to play with more energy than that. Like that was just the effort was just non-existent for Philadelphia in that game. So I'm not a believer that you have to break up the Simmons-Embiid core. These are great players that are still very much in their early to mid-20s. I think you just need to find the right chemistry around them. I mean, they started this year, Rich, without shooting. They let J.J. Redick walk, Jimmy Butler left, and they didn't replace them with any capable shooters. Like, if you have 2 players like Embiid and Simmons, the other 10 guys that are in your active roster need to be shooters, all of them. And if they're not, you're not doing those players any favors out there on the floor. So to me, this starts with Elton Brand in the front office, being better at putting the right talent around those 2 players.
That said, Chris, I mean, wasn't the conversation about the Sixers pre-COVID during the 70-game regular season that we saw prior to the stoppage all about that Simmons and Embiid were not mixing well on the floor at all and might not actually be obviously when you've got 2 superstar players, that's what you need in the NBA, and you can add a third. That's what puts you definitely over the top potentially. But if the 2 superstars don't complement each other, or they can't figure it out, or it can't be figured out, that's a problem. Wasn't that the conversation about the Sixers?
It was the conversation, but I do think you have to zoom out, if you will, and look at it in the bigger picture that the team they had last year was not brought back. And what happens, Rich, if that Kawhi Leonard baseline jumper takes 1 extra bounce and falls out, and the Sixers go on to win that game? Are we having an entirely different conversation? Does Philadelphia win the championship? Maybe. I mean, Toronto went on to win the whole thing. Would Philadelphia? I mean, is it really as simple as one bouncing ball changing the perception of this team? I think where Philadelphia made a huge mistake was not paying Jimmy Butler. Like, it would have been an expensive team, that's for sure, but Jimmy Butler has been brilliant for Miami this year. And the Sixers just didn't believe that in a 5-year contract, Jimmy Butler would be able to stay healthy enough and produce enough to live up to that money. That was a mistake. Butler on that team would have given them the shooting, the extra playmaking, and the gravitas they need to win, a series like they're in with Boston. That, I think this is less about Simmons and Embiid and far more about the kind of players that are being put around them.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.